Good evening and welcome to Solidarity on Tap. My name is Chris Kerr with the Ignatian Solidarity Network, and on behalf of everyone at ISN, as well as our national Solidarity on Tap sponsors, Mary No Lay Missioners, Jesuit Volunteer Corps, and Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest, thanks for joining us tonight. We're so glad to have you. For over 15 years, the Ignatian Solidarity Network has been uniting the Ignatian family, meaning the Jesuit network, as well as all those who are inspired to work for justice through the spiritual tradition of St. Ignatius of Loyola, to build a more just world through transformational programs and resources that deepen faith and lead to dismantling systematic injustice, through collaborative initiatives that bridge divides and overcome exclusion, and collective action to defend and promote the inherent dignity of all God's creation, both people and planet. If you haven't already done so, please make sure to check out our website, ignatiansolidarity.net, and like and follow us on social media to get the latest advocacy alerts, educational resources, and much more. Now, many of you know this already, but for those who are joining us for the first time, let me give you the background on Solidarity on Tap. It didn't used to be like this, okay? In the pre-COVID world, it usually took place in cities across the country, bringing together members of the Ignatian family in local bars and pubs. It was a lot of fun. But like many things, we moved virtual in late March, and it's been fun too. And so we thought we'd keep doing it. And here we are, many weeks and months later. And even though we're gathering virtually, the goal of Solidarity on Tap is the same: to invite people to enjoy fellowship, maybe with a drink in hand, and to hear powerful reflections from members of the network engaged in work for justice. And as always, in order to build and enjoy community tonight, I encourage you to utilize the comment section on Facebook or YouTube, or post to Twitter or Instagram with the hashtag ISNLive to let us know you and your institution are represented tonight. For those who don't know, we actually will share some of those shout outs from across the country and even beyond on screen. So we want to make sure we know you're out there, Ignatian family, all right? So you can also post your comments and questions for our guest speaker this evening on either Twitter or Facebook. We want to hear from you. We'd love to ask some questions at the end of the program from you. So let us know what they are as we get to know our guest this evening. I also just want to mention that as we gather tonight as an Ignatian family, we continue to pray for all people affected by COVID-19. We pray for essential workers that continue to support the needs of our country and our global community. We pray for our educational institutions, the students, the faculty, the staff at colleges and high schools across the country that we work with, who are continuing to navigate this unprecedented time that the academic year brings. And we pray for our country as well during this challenging time, especially as we approach the election and try to reflect on who we want to be as a nation. Tonight's conversation provides us the opportunity to explore the work of law through the lens of social justice. Our hope is that this and all Solidarity on Tap conversations can lead us toward a hope-filled future. So with this in mind, I'm really excited to introduce our guest tonight, Bill Quigley. Bill is a law professor and director of the Law Clinic and the Gillis Long Poverty Law Center at Loyola University, New Orleans. Bill has been an active public interest and human rights lawyer since 1977. He served as counsel with a wide range of public interest organizations on issues including Hurricane Katrina's social justice issues, public housing, voting rights, the death penalty, living wage, human rights, civil liberties, educational reform, constitutional rights, and civil disobedience. Bill has litigated numerous cases with the NAACP, Legal Defense and Educational Fund, the Advancement Project, and with the ACLU of Louisiana, where he was the general counsel for over 15 years. He's been an active lawyer with the School of the Americas Watch and the Institute for Justice and Democracy in Haiti. Bill served as legal director of the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York City from 2009 to 2011 before returning to Loyola. Bill teaches in the Law Clinic and teaches courses in law and poverty, social justice lawyering, and Catholic social teaching and law. His research and writing has focused on community lawyering, living wage, the right to a job, legal services, community organizing as part of effective lawyering, civil disobedience, high-stakes testing, international human rights, revolutionary lawyering, and a continuing history of how the laws have regulated the poor since colonial times. He has served as an advisor on human and civil rights to Human Rights Watch USA, Amnesty International USA, and served as the chair of the Louisiana Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. So with all that, welcome, Bill. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. It's great to be here again. I've been in many of these things over the years, and I've never done one on like this, but I look forward to it.
Well, and I understand you have a beer with you there. So
I do.
Cheers. I understand you have a special beer mixture there that you've created.
That's right. I'm calling it a Solidarity Suds. It's a light beer and a Peroni together.
An Italian, a light Italian, if you will.
Light Italian, yes.
I like it. Excellent. Well, great to have you with us tonight. Always great to get to talk with you and learn about the work that you're doing on a variety of issues. But of course, you're doing all this work, both your teaching and your lawyering, in the midst of the global pandemic. What's that been like for you these past 8 or so months, kind of navigating the pandemic from where you sit?
Well, I think like everybody, it's been challenging trying to figure out under what circumstances you can take risks and what circumstances you ought to be as safe as possible. I'm, as you can tell, I'm 70 years old, so I'm one of the people in the high risk category. So trying to stay distant as much as possible, but I do a lot of work with demonstrations and organizations and civil disobedience and human rights and other things. So there are times I get to go to protests, participate in those, go to jails, go to courthouses, go to class, meet some other people outside as much as possible. Occasionally have to go inside as well, but it's a tough time. It's really a tough time. I feel very, very badly, particularly in Louisiana, like the rest of the country. Our African-American sisters and brothers are hit much harder than the white people in our town, in our state, dying at about twice the rate of white people in our state. So this is, I think, an illustration of a lot of the injustices in our society, the racism in our healthcare system, and in all of the various systems, institutional racism that we go through. And then, of course, obviously, this time of real questioning and challenge and conflict over the role of policing in our communities, and not just policing, but the whole criminal legal system. So it's a tough time, but I have met many wonderful people through this and look forward to continuing this work and coming out on the other end with everybody else.
That's great, and it is a tough time, and it's good that you're being conscious of caring for yourself, but also very concerned about the needs of others as well. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got to? You said you're 70 years old. How did you get to where you are? How does one get to be a lawyer so deeply engaged in social justice work? What contributed to that? Who contributed to that over the years?
So I'm an Irish Catholic from the Midwest. I'm the oldest of 9 kids. And my parents, despite having a gigantic family, were often involved in helping in the community. And it was influenced through them, through members of my family, through some Catholic sisters that I ran into, some Catholic priests, that I thought that charity and justice were important ideals for us. I studied to become a Catholic priest for a while, but I had authority issues. So the people in the seminary kept saying, "Bill, you don't have the right attitude to become a priest." And of course, with authority issues, you don't listen to authority. So I kept trying to go back to another seminary and ended up in New Orleans. I graduated from Purdue in the Midwest, came to New Orleans to study in Notre Dame Seminary here, learned enough theology to realize that what I was really interested in was social justice, and it wasn't so much the rest of being a priest. And so I left in theology, did some social work for a couple of years in a public housing development with another group of very wonderful Catholic sisters, and was interested in being a lawyer. I wanted to help people and wanted to be involved in the struggle, and learned a lot from the mothers and grandmothers in public housing, and ran into a bunch of lawyers in working with people and accompanying people, and actually wasn't that impressed by the lawyers that I met, and thought, well, if they can be lawyers, I can be a lawyer too. So I was fortunate enough by that time to have married a wonderful Cajun woman who had herself studied to be a nun. And we sort of dedicated ourselves to sort of the Catholic worker lifestyle. And she helped me get through law school. And then we had children and worked for legal services, was in private practice, and got a call from Loyola to help them teach a course in law and poverty, which I had worked for legal services, and law and poverty was really my number one and initial interest. And from there, just ended up being called upon to help people in different situations, and ended up just having a very, very fortunate life involved with thousands of people who have struggled for justice. And it's not a high-paying part of what I do. It's mostly all volunteer work, but it is extremely meaningful, inspirational, educational, and the like. And then I'm very lucky that I ended up as a teacher at Loyola, where you can't really get in trouble for working on social justice issues the way you can at other places. And I've learned so much from the thousands of students that I've worked with over the years, and just have had a very blessed and very fortunate life.
That's great. Bill, I want to talk a little bit about some of the casework that you've been doing recently. But before I do that, we have some folks that have let us know that they're out there, so I just want to say hi to them. So we're going to say welcome to Anne Marie, who's joining us from Glen Rock, New Jersey. Welcome to Margaret, who's joining us from Birmingham, Michigan. Karen is joining us and says, greetings from the Marino Lay Missioners. So welcome, Karen. Thanks for being with us. Mary Kay is joining us from Columbia, Maryland. So great to have all these folks with us tonight. And if you're out there, let us know where you're tuning in from, so that we can share that you're there. Now, Bill, one of the most recent cases that you've been working on deals with folks who were impacted by Hurricane Laura, which of course came onshore kind of around the Texas-Louisiana border as a Category 4 hurricane. Lots of destruction, created a lot of challenges for people in terms of their housing. People evacuated that area of the Gulf, and now evacuees are trying to reclaim their life and things like that. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with folks who were evacuees and are trying to recover from that situation?
Yeah, there's tens of thousands of people who lost their homes, either the homes that they lived in or the apartments that they lived in and the like, from the damage from this hurricane. And as you said, it's really right on the Texas-Louisiana border. Lake Charles is a town of about 150,000 people. And then there's a community, a lot of fishing communities and like around there. Being from New Orleans, we have a lot of experience with trying to come back after a hurricane with Hurricane Katrina, and have been in contact with a number of the people who were displaced, evacuated by this. It was a mandatory evacuation, so people had to leave. The expectation was to leave for 2 or 3 days, so most people packed a suitcase, because you never know with these hurricanes that coming right at you and then they turn at the last minute and go another place. People left with a suitcase, and they haven't been home. I mean, this was the very beginning of September, so people have been out now for several weeks, and it's very, very disorienting. People lost their jobs because the jobs aren't there anymore. The places where they worked, jobs are gone. Their homes are gone. Their apartments are gone. And we were contacted by a group of people who lived in one apartment complex in particular, had 191 families in it. And the apartment complex was saying, well, look, as soon as the power comes back on, we'll get you back in here. And then they changed their tune and said, well, actually, we don't think you can come back at all. And you have to, our insurance company's telling us that we have to get everything out of here so it can be fixed up. So we're going to give you about a week or so to come empty out your apartments and take anything that you want to keep. Otherwise, we're just going to throw it away. And so we tried to get in touch with the owners who were out of state. Didn't work. Demand letters, tried to get the news media involved and the like, and ended up having to file a class action lawsuit where we pulled a judge who was himself evacuated as a result of this and displaced as a result of the hurricane. And he signed a temporary restraining order saying that the complex couldn't throw anybody out without going through the eviction process in the courts. And the courts are only half open, so they're not going to be doing that. And so we were able to, put a pause button on the sort of some of the terrible things that are happening to people. And because we got a fair amount of publicity from it, we have been able to stop the evictions of a lot of other people as a result of the hurricane, which is, a very modest victory because people still don't have places to live and they still don't have their jobs, but at least the few possessions they do have, they have a chance to be able to reclaim them. You can imagine if you're displaced from your apartment or your home, you're living in a hotel or you're living, in a bedroom where you grew up in, and somebody says you got to get your beds, your chest, the drawers, your couch, your TV, everything that you own has to get out of here in a few days. You don't have a place to put it. A lot of people don't even have transportation. They lost everything in this. So that is the kind of thing that we're able to put together a team of lawyers to do that and, give a little bit of relief to people who are really fighting for just the basics at this point.
It seems like for people in a situation like that, and for a lot of folks to understand how the law can, I guess, help them, or how the law should be serving them, would be really complex. Like, it seems like so many people must be in situations like that across the country during natural disasters or other, significant events. Like, how do we make finding ways to seek justice, through things like what you were doing, like a class action suit? Like, how do we make that more accessible to people? Why does it have to be so hard for the world to be just? I guess it's an existential question I'm asking you, I guess, but I don't know. I mean, have you seen things get any easier for people to seek this type of assistance that you and others who have been working on that case are able to offer over your years of doing this kind of work?
So I think, there's good and bad in this answer. The bad is that the inequality in our society is worse now than it's been in many decades. So there are more working class and poor people, even middle class people, that cannot possibly afford a lawyer. So they're dependent on the generosity of people or government lawyers and the like. Government lawyers, legal aid lawyers have been cut back dramatically in the past several years. On the good side, there are more and more young women and men who are becoming social justice lawyers, either full-time with legal aid or public defender or some sort of nonprofit thing, or people who are in a for-profit law firm but are spending time and committed to spending a certain percentage of their time helping people. So it is complex. The law just keeps getting more and more complex. And that's one of the things that I think that we need to address, is not just to get more lawyers to help people, but to try to reverse the trend of making it so important that people have lawyers. There are more social justice lawyers than we have ever had. But at the same time, there's much more demand for them than there ever was. And so I think we have to encourage the people who are doing it, but we also have to de-lawyer some of the basic things that people do in our society. For example, just the very basic thing of family law. if somebody is involved in separation or divorce, child support, child custody, those sort of things, you almost always have to go to court for that. And we may some of us may be lucky enough to stay married for all our lives, but it's very high percentage of people that doesn't apply to. And our courts in New Orleans, but all over the country, half the people who show up in court can't afford a lawyer. And you don't get an appointed lawyer for a family law issue. And so they're there trying to be their own lawyers. People who are victims of domestic violence, who are trying to get a restraining order against an abusive spouse, are there without lawyers and having to stand up in court and explain how they were physically, mentally, and even sexually abused by the person who has perpetrated the violence against them. So there's work to be done on the individual level of assisting and coming together in teams to do it. There's work to be done on the professional level of trying to change our thing, but also on the social level. And I think that's one of the great things about Catholic social teaching, that shows us it's important to have just and fair relationships between one another, but it's not just a one-to-one situation. That justice demands that our other relationships, our social relationships, are just, and that expands beyond just the one-to-one, just the family, to the community, to the state, to the nation, to the world. And it's very tough, but it's very, very meaningful work if you have a chance to do it. And there are more and more people trying to do that. So I'm both hopeful and recognizing that there's a big challenge ahead of us.
Sure. And you get to work or teach a lot of those young folks kind of coming into the system, so to speak, there at Loyola. And you teach them about Catholic social teaching as a part of their law program. What are some of the things that you try to? What are some of the things that they come out of a class on Catholic social teaching and the law, understanding it maybe they didn't understand coming in? I mean, and I guess maybe another question would be, what do Loyola Law School students think they're going to get when they come to Loyola Law School, and what do they leave with they didn't realize they were going to encounter during their time there?
So, I mean, we have hundreds of people each year that come, so it's a little hard to generalize. But what I would say is, like myself, honestly, I think most Catholic college graduates have very little understanding of Catholic social teaching. We're very clear what the Catholic teaching is about sexuality and reproductive issues and that, but where the church stands in terms of immigration, where the church stands in terms of nuclear war, where the church stands in terms of protecting the environment and the dignity of work and living wage and all that. Those are usually tremendously little known parts of what it means to be a Catholic and what the social teaching is involved. And so that I find is very surprising to people. And but it does fit with most people's understanding of human rights and what is just and important in the world. But it's a surprise. It's a pleasant surprise, but it is a surprise. And I guess our hope for people who come to Loyola is that they not only learn just the basics of being a lawyer, which everybody can learn this, whatever their religion is or not, but that they learn what it means to be a person for others, that they learn that there is a purpose in the working for justice besides commercial success. There's a lot of people come to law school just because it's a way to make money, and that's fine if that's good enough for them. It's not good enough for a lot of people. They have to borrow a lot of money, so you have to pay those loans off, which is tough. But to understand that justice is part of it, and trying to figure out how we can contribute to the justice campaigns, because we recognize that we are not just giving when we're involved in justice, that there is a give and take relationship, and that we are being taught while we are teaching. We are learning while we think we are educating, and we are inspired by the people that we think we've come to help.
Mm, mm. That's great. Thanks for that, Bill. And I want to ask you about another case, but I just want a couple more folks have joined us. So just to say welcome to Kelly, who's joining us from San Diego. Thanks for being with us, Kelly. And then to Nelson in Los Angeles, there's a watch party happening at St. Mark's Young Adult Ministry. So welcome to everybody there at St. Mark's. And then also Karen wanted to let us know that Melissa is part of a watch party there happening. She says greetings from El Salvador. So welcome, Melissa. Thanks for being with us tonight. Bill, another case we've been working on has to do with a company called Formosa Plastics, and there's been a couple pieces to this work. I know that part of it is related to the plastics, that plastic kind of side product or byproduct that's impacting communities, but then also some of the land that they own has another has a longer story, or an older story to it, I guess. Can you tell us about some of the work related to Formosa?
So this is in the greater context of what we call environmental justice, which is concern for the environment and for all things living, which is part of what we're really concerned about, all of us, but also the very clearly documented tendency of these huge polluting factories and companies to locate in communities of color, people who do not have a lot of money, people who do not have a lot of power. And in New Orleans, we have what they call Cancer Alley between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. They have hundreds of chemical plants and very, very high rates of cancer, and often put down right in the middle of an African-American neighborhood or community. A lot of these communities along there are semi-rural, but a lot of African-Americans. These were areas that were plantations in the 1700s and the 1800s. And so there are a lot of people who are descendants of people who live there. And so they've been fighting against this toxic environment for some time, a lot of African-American-led communities. And the Formosa is a multinational company that has a terrible history of abusing people and communities and the environment. And they are building one of the biggest plants in the world in the middle, right in the middle of an African-American community, halfway between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. This community has community organizations mostly led by African-American women who are, in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, because they're the ones who are still living there. The kids have grown up and moved away. These are people who have been teachers, active in the church and the like. And so they've been standing up to these plants and trying to do something about it. And recently, within the past year or so, we have found out that on the site where they expect to build this gigantic toxic plant are cemeteries of apparently enslaved people who probably go back to pre-Civil War days, and trying to honor the folks who have come before us and the people who struggled in those times. That the communities have really rallied around trying to respect the resting places for these folks. And this recently, just on Juneteenth, wanted to have a religious ceremony honoring these ancestors who've come before us. And the cemeteries are actually in the middle of what were sugarcane fields. So there's maybe a half a mile away from the highway. And so they had started walking out there and saying prayers before this. And the Formosa asked the local sheriff and law enforcement to tell these people that they were going to press charges against them if they came back anymore. So they asked, so could we please just go out there for this Juneteenth ceremony and say some prayers and the like? And the Formosa wouldn't do it. And so they took them to court, and were able to get a court order to say that they should be allowed to go out there on Juneteenth. And they did hold like a hour-and-a-half service. A Catholic priest was one of the leaders of that service, and it was a beautiful, beautiful event. On the same day that they went out there to hold the religious service, I received a call from law enforcement in Baton Rouge, which is, about 80 miles away from New Orleans, saying that the police were bringing felony charges against two of the activists involved in this this opposition to Formosa, and arising out of an incident that happened last fall, where the activists took these little pieces of plastic that were about the size of a grain of rice, that were brought over to Louisiana from environmental activists in Texas, who had persuaded the federal government to sue Formosa in Texas for dumping tons and tons of these little plastic pellets into the waterways of Texas. And they had used these, they call them nurdles, Nurdles, and you can Google that and see the story if you want. They brought these nurdles over and put them in clear plastic containers and went around and put them on the doorstep of some of the Formosa executives and some of the other chemical lobbyists in Baton Rouge, which is our state capital. And for doing that, they had charged these two women with terrorism, a felony charge, and they were arrested and stayed in jail for 8 to 10 hours, put in handcuffs and leg cuffs and transported to jail, and charged with this ridiculous felony for returning byproducts to the people who dumped them into other communities. And that case is still ongoing, but it gives you an idea of how tough it is to be standing up for the environment and standing up for people and communities of color, that this is not some sort of hobby. This is life and death stuff, and they're having to pay huge consequences as a result of that. They're still in the fight. They're marching, they're protesting, they're appearing before Congress, they're doing everything that they can do. And it's quite an uphill battle, but they're in it and they're fighting, and it's an honor to be alongside of them, believe me.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that and kind of contextualizing it in a larger movement around environmental justice. But I want to touch on something you've connected into this a couple different times. The realities of these issues of marginalization being connected to race, and kind of touching on the idea of systemic racism and unjust structures that perpetuate racism. And I was curious to know, particularly, in the past 6 or 7 months, like as you've observed what's happening across our country in the wake of the murder of killing of George Floyd and things like that. What are some of your what have some of your reactions been to all that's happening? What does it connect with in your own work? I mean, I think you've touched on this a little bit, but systemic racism, like how what do you think about where we are in the context of that reality in today's society?
So a couple things. I just don't think, well, one is I think there's a lot of people very afraid of what's happening. And they think that African-American, young white people, other people who are fighting against this stuff are overreacting and exaggerating, and that don't really understand how important the police and the criminal legal system are. I think even in the short term, there's no way that what's happening in the year 2020 could be happening without the work groundwork done by Black Lives Matter and allies in 2014 and 2015 around the killing, the murders in Ferguson, New York. Here we had one in Baton Rouge as well, which all of those also go back to issues of absolute racism in the way that policing happens in all of our communities, not just in the South, not just in the cities, but in all places. And I think that we have to be committed, number one, to standing with the victims of oppression. I mean, I think that's a fundamental part of Catholic social teaching. Even if we don't totally understand it as middle class white people or people of privilege and that we don't understand, we have to listen and we have to not judge, but try to understand. And the killings that we've seen in videos recently, my friends and communities that I'm with say that those have been happening all along. It's just that we didn't have videos. We didn't have that. And so these are not surprises. They're disappointments, and they're really hurtful and harmful disappointments, but they are the kinds of things that have been going on for decades, if not longer, in a lot of our cities and in our states. And so what that I think that means to us is that we have to be willing. You hear people defund the police or other things like that. I do think that we have to be willing to take a very fundamental, critical look at the entire criminal legal system, from the police to the prosecutors, to our jails, to our prisons and all that, and just say, is this process making us safer? We, as a human right to safety, we're entitled to that. All of us want that for each other. But is the way that we're doing our policing, is that really making us safer? I tell you, in many communities, it is not. Is the way that police are protected from any sort of prosecution when they make mistakes or they take action that we think they should go before a jury. We've seen that recently in Louisville. No, the police get extra protection. They know it, and they should have, I think most people would agree, they should have the same protection as everybody else. And shouldn't, instead of a policing and a penalizing and criminalizing and jailing system, shouldn't we try to look for a safety system? And shouldn't we be willing to reevaluate each step of this criminal legal system, not just the police, but the decisions about what are crimes and what are not crimes, who gets a ticket and who gets thrown in jail, who gets to get right out of jail and who stays in jail, who gets a misdemeanor and who gets a felony, who gets 5 years in jail and who gets 50 years in jail. And all that whole process has been built up in a way that really doesn't take into account the considerations of poor people, people of color, and the oppressed in our communities. And it's easy to criticize people who are standing against it, but this is a time for us that I think we'll never go back to where we were last year. That there's enough people making enough of advocacy that we have to change. And there are changes that are happening all over the country. So I think it's very important. The intersection of racism and the criminal legal system is a horrendous place, as anybody who's spent any time in jails or in courthouses or police stations can tell you. We have legitimate concerns for safety. We need to be protected from some people in some situations, but this system is not making us safer. It is destroying millions of lives. And with every person that goes to jail and is part of the system, they have mothers, they have children, they have sisters, they have brothers and the like, and we are destroying millions of families in doing this. And so we have to come up with a better way.
Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate the way you kind of frame that, kind of address the, in a thoughtful way, offering some analysis around the idea of defunding the police and talking about safety. I think that's really helpful. And you also talked about activists. And after we're going to take a little break here and thank our sponsors, but I want to talk about some of your work with activists over the years. We're going to give you a little bit of break. You can have a sip of that Solidarity Sud that you have there, and we'll be right back. Okay, so I want to share a few ways that you can connect with the Ignatian Solidarity Network. First off, this fall, really in the next month or so, exercise the right and responsibility to vote for candidates and issues that support the common good and concern for the most vulnerable people in our society. You can join ISN's Voting is an Act of Love campaign to register and commit to vote in this election and to mobilize your community. There's still time to get involved. You can go to igsol.net, that's igsol.net/vote, and learn more about the Voting is an Act of Love campaign. Secondly, from October 19th to the 26th, you can be part of the first ever virtual Ignatian Family Teach-In for Justice. You can join the largest annual Catholic social justice gathering in the country from a screen near you. You'll be joining over 5,000 people who have already registered. And you can hear from powerful speakers like Father Brian Massengale, author Olga Segura, Mauricio Lopez from the Amazon region of South America, Father Greg Boyle, Father Jim Martin, Bishop Mark Seitz, Sister Helen Prejean, and many more exciting speakers. So we want you to act quickly. Today's a great day to register for the teaching. You can go to ignatiansolidarity.net/IFTJ to register. We'd love to have you be involved in the teach-in. You can also join ISN and our partners at the Jesuit Conference's Office of Justice and Ecology in calling on the U.S. Senate to take immediate action to address the social sin of police violence. This ties right to what we were talking about with Bill a moment ago. Through federal police reform legislation, you can take action right now, actually by texting the word reform, REFORM, to 202-800-1541. Again, that's reform to 202-800-1541, and you can take action right from your phone. So we hope you'll do that today. Let me tell you about our sponsors for Solidarity on Tap tonight. First is Maryknoll Lay Missioners, who work intentionally with those at the margins for a more just, compassionate, and sustainable world. You can learn more about their work by joining their Meet a Missioner Monday live streams on their Facebook page every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So make sure to check that out. Secondly is the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, JVC, a full-time volunteer program that works for social justice while exploring spirituality and faith through a framework of Catholic Ignatian values for individuals between the ages of 21 and 35 years of age. You can learn more at jesuitvolunteers.org. And JVC Northwest, Jesuit Volunteer Corps Northwest. They're focused on the core values of community, simple living, social and ecological justice, and spirituality and reflection. JVC Northwest is a national direct AmeriCorps program serving 24 locales across Alaska, Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Washington. And you must be 21 or over to be eligible for JVC Northwest. And you can learn more at jvcnorthwest.org. We also invite you to join us for our upcoming Solidarity on Tap, which will feature Father Jim Martin from America Magazine. So we hope you can join us. You can learn more at igsol.net/SOT. And if you like the conversation this evening and want to share it or watch it again, don't worry. Tonight's conversation and all our previous Solidarity on Tap conversations are available at ignatiansolidarity.net or on our YouTube or Facebook pages. So make sure to go there and check that out. Also, if you enjoyed tonight, please consider making a gift to sustain the work of the Ignatian Solidarity Network. You can do that at ignatiansolidarity.net/donate. And lastly, if you're into the Instagram, as they call it, you can share a picture of yourself watching or having a Zoom virtual watch party tonight to your Instagram account and tag Ignatian Solidarity. That's at Ignatian Solidarity. And don't forget to use that hashtag ISNLive. We want to feature your story in our story. We want to feature your picture, I guess, in our story is what we want to do. So make sure to post that picture of you watching tonight. And now let's come back to Bill. Bill, I actually got to know you through your work with School of the Americas Watch. and encountered you a number of times at the gates of Fort Benning in Columbus, Georgia, as people gathered on an annual basis to commemorate the lives of tens of thousands of people who were killed by Latin American soldiers trained at the what was then known as the School of the Americas. This is one of numerous kind of activist groups engaged in nonviolent civil disobedience that you have supported as a legal team member and in other ways. Can you talk a little bit about some of the work that you've done with SOA Watch and with others over the years?
Yeah, so I was recruited by SOA Watch to help represent, actually, the year that I was asked to help out, 85 people were arrested and charged with federal trespass violations for going on to the base to protest the School of the Americas, which trained a lot of very horrible Latin American military leaders who were responsible for a lot of atrocities in Latin America. And it's hard work, took a lot of time, but I got to meet some of the greatest people, because if somebody cares enough about their justice issue to be willing to risk going to prison for 3-6 months, they feel very strongly about it, obviously, and they can be very inspirational folks to get to know. And so I started that, and I've represented maybe 150 people in the federal courts in Georgia over the years, along with plenty of other lawyers, but been part of the legal team for that. I've also been fortunate enough to represent a number of the Plowshares activists who have taken symbolic actions against nuclear weapons in this country, in cases in North Dakota and Tacoma, Washington, Knoxville, up in New York, and now in Georgia, and represented Catholic nuns, Catholic priests, including a few Jesuits who were arrested and ultimately went to prison for their beliefs that we should demilitarize these nuclear weapons that have only the purpose of destroying the earth, the only purpose that they have. In fact, right now, there's a Jesuit priest in jail in Georgia. His name is Father Stephen Kelly, who I've represented on a couple of occasions. And he is somebody who's really a prophet, I think, for peace and for justice, and is so passionate about it that he's willing to go to jail and go to prison, federal prison, to illustrate how important it is to try to do something about these weapons. I've represented people in Haiti. I have a wonderful priest, Père Jean Just, in Port-au-Prince, that was in and out of prison there for standing up to the coup government. Represented a lot of people in a lot of places across the country and in Louisiana. And we lose most of the cases. So one of the times I was in Georgia, I stay in the courthouse till everybody is finished and everybody's processed and the like. And the marshal walks me out, and this marshal is walking me out, and he said, "Bill, tell me what the story is with this, because you go to court with all these people, they all get found guilty, they all get sent to prison, and yet when you walk outside the courthouse, everybody cheers." And well, you have to hang around with the right people, where going to challenging the government and being willing to risk arrest is a virtue. And it's a privilege. Not everybody has the opportunity to do that, but it is part of most social movements. I would encourage the people who are watching, to think about, what justice is about. Social change, and how does social change comes about. And I think by studying the successful movements for social change just over the last 100 years, the opportunity of women to get the right to vote, the fight over legal segregation, fight over to get rights for the disabled, the fight to be able to unionize, to hold a union, which was illegal, to the fight for LGBTQ rights, and environmental and all this stuff, is that people usually engage in a multitude of actions, legislative actions, communication actions, organizing, knocking on doors, talking to people, expanding their group, media stuff, and direct action and protest is part of it. And so that's a place where a lawyer can help out. And I've been very fortunate to be able to accompany a lot of people to do that. And my role is really just to try to give them as much space in the courtroom as possible to be able to tell their stories to the judges, to the jurors, and to the news media who's there, to be able to amplify the voices that they have. Which brings me to this one, I've made a couple of mistakes, quite a few mistakes. If you live long enough, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. As a young person, I was really interested in social justice, being a voice for the voiceless. And I have found, I've been taught and through my experiences, that is really wrong. That we don't need, our communities don't need a voice for the voiceless, because ultimately there aren't really any voiceless people. There are people who have voices that are not being listened to, people who have small voices that are being drowned out by the powerful and amplified voices. So it's not necessarily our job to be a voice for the voiceless, but to try to work and recreate the world in such a way that the voices, the quiet voices, the voices of people who are often overlooked and marginalized and oppressed, that those voices have a chance to be heard. And so I've been taught that. I've learned that. I don't always practice what I learn. We're like all of us, so we can know things and not understand them. And then the last thing I would say is this: you talked about at the beginning, hope. Hope, I think in talking about these issues, it's the issue of climate change, the issue of nuclear weapons, the issue of racism in our criminal legal system, the inequalities, immigration, those things. If we just focus on the issues, we can get very disappointed and very disheartened and very depressed by that. But what I have found is that in any of these issues, if you take the opportunity to volunteer, to reach out, and to connect with the people and the communities that are at the point of the sword, who are struggling with these issues, that it is the connection with those people that gives us insight into some real beauty and communities and strength and courage and ultimately inspiration for us to be able to continue this work by dealing with the issues, but dealing with the issues not just in an intellectual and academic sense, but really by connecting with people who are fighting to bring about social change. So I think that that's very important. And part of that is the idea which you started with, which is hope. And hope and love and community are essential elements of this work. We cannot survive without these. And I think the idea of hope is tied up with this idea of anger. And I was given the message growing up that anger was a sin, or anger was something that we should avoid. And I think that there are injustices in the world that are legitimate causes for anger. And so figuring out how to deal with that anger, if you're just being angry, doesn't help anybody. And doesn't help yourself, it doesn't help others. But as I'm sure many of the people on this call know, St. Augustine had this beautiful, beautiful quote that hope has two beautiful daughters: anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and the courage to do something about it. So it's not hope that we're sitting there, just optimism that things are going to get better. It is seeing injustice, investing ourselves, being courageous to invest ourselves with the people who are fighting that. And that investment to try and transform injustice brings about the hope that gives us the energy to keep going.
That was beautiful, Bill. And I'm always trying to think about ways to refine my job, so maybe they don't even need me anymore. And you actually have done that, because my last question was going to be to ask you about kind of where you find hope. And so I really appreciate that reflection and the way you articulated the importance of nonviolence, civil disobedience, in terms of creating a platform for voices and stories to be shared. And I remember I remember being outside the courthouse in Columbus and waiting for, I think it was Magistrate Faircloth, was that right? Who would, make decisions. Of course, always losing, right? But always having the opportunity to share the voices of people from Latin America who were directly impacted by folks there and things like that. So thanks so much for kind of closing things out tonight. It's been really great to talk with you and to learn both about some of your work currently, but also to learn about kind of your background and your work over the years. So thanks so much for being willing to share with us tonight. And thank you to everyone who joined us from all over the country and beyond this evening. And again, if you like tonight's conversation, you want to see it again or share it, don't worry, you can go to ignatiansolidarity.net or our YouTube page to do so. And we will see you in a couple weeks for Solidarity on Tap again. So thanks everyone. Have a great evening.